Welcome guys once again to the Nostalgia Factor. I am Mayra and I'm also the Uncanny Critic. The Nostalgia Factor is a series where we talk about media that I feel nostalgic about for a reason or the other, and we kind of examine this piece of media from my slightly older eyes, talk about things I remember from it, and assess it all in all. So for today, our nostalgia factor subject is the Bourne Trilogy. This might seem like a very weird thing to feel nostalgic about, but for me it makes a lot of sense. I used to watch this movie in the background a lot growing up because it used to come a lot on our TV and my family used to like it. I was just there, tuning in for some shots and scenes, but then scrolling through my phone mindlessly. I really spent hours on my phone. I don't know what kept me glued to my phone like that, but it was just hours of me scrolling, and I didn't pay attention to the movies, but I did revisit it recently, watched the full thing, and I just realized, that is something I feel nostalgic towards. Something, that stuck out to me, for example, is that ending, the funny sound at the end of each movie. I thought that was epic, and I feel very nostalgic to that song, which is Extreme Ways by Moby. I think it's a great fit to the trilogy and also very nostalgia-inducing to me. What is the Bourne Trilogy? If you're not aware of it, trilogy of movies. We're not going to talk about the other ones really that much, but we might touch on them. They are a trilogy of movies based on a book that talk about a man who kind of wakes up in the middle of the ocean, ends up, being taken on a ship, and he doesn't remember anything about himself, nothing at all, not his name, not where he comes from. He's being chased by the Seya, which is what we will call the CIA. Fictional, guys, it is fictional story. We'll call them the Seya for now because it's also really amusing to me. The Seya is chasing him and he doesn't know why. And you discover that things might not be as clear-cut as we thought throughout the trilogy. So I think that's really what I will say, because I honestly think that it will be much more enriching to watch it without knowing anything about it, and then you can be like, ooh, this is cool. I didn't see that coming. Although I think it's extremely hard since it is something that is heavily spoiled at this point, and not really, people don't really care about spoiling it, but you should definitely give it a watch. I think it's one of those things that are essential viewings. So when it comes to the nostalgia factor, I would give it maybe a 6 out of 10 because I am nostalgic about it. Again, does not drive me to tears, but it very much reminds me of a time I feel sentimental towards, movie nights with my families where I'm not necessarily looking. So is it actually good? Objectively, I think it is good. I think it is decent/good. It was revolutionary in the Shaky Cam game, and we will talk about this in the video. But other than that, I thought it was compelling, and also critics agree that it was compelling. But for me, I do think I like it better. Again, I am a biased and unreliable narrator because I feel nostalgic towards it. So here are some things I remember. First of all, let's talk about the Shaky Cam and its purpose. So if you guys know anything about the Bourne Trilogy and the directing, the first movie is directed by Doug Liman. Oh my god, these names. But the last two movies are directed by a guy called Paul Greengrass. Yes, that is his real name. Doug Liman's style wasn't very shaky cam, not a lot of handheld, not a lot of, frequent cuts. It was very straightforward, straight to the point, very raw, I would say, while Paul Greengrass, on the other hand, was very into the shaky cam thing, and at the time it was kind of a new thing in action flicks. And in addition to that, there was the whole rapid cutting in fight scenes especially, and in very action-packed scenes. That was also revolutionary for the time. This style was new. Everybody who who took film class or who takes film class knows that rapid cuts elevate tension and signify action. Same with shaky cam and handheld, they signify uneasiness and action. That thing you learned in film class, well, the Bourne Supremacy and the Bourne Ultimatum and Paul Greengrass as a director kind of popularized it through this series. In this series, in the last two films where he directs, it is very fitting to the theme. You know, our main character, Jason Bourne, is himself very disoriented and he doesn't know who he is, and there's just a lot of paranoia and like the feeling that you're being watched and the feeling that you're being followed. This guy, they would not cut him any slack. He was always being followed. The idea that, you know, his memories are fragmented, and it is signified and implied through this very shaky handheld style with a lot of cuts. It is disorienting and jarring because that is what the character is experiencing, and we're put in the character's shoes. Again, very fitting to the theme of the film, and I think it is used here quite well most of the time. I have motion sickness. There was a part in this movie with the car chase scene where I just felt like I couldn't do it. It was just a little bit too much, to be honest. Again, it gets indulgent here. It was just in that scene in the second movie. Other than that, it was alright. Again, like I said, it is meant to be disorienting, right? I'm not gonna compare this to Gaspar Noé right now, but like Gaspar Noé, for example, does things like that with his movies, you know, where he kind of puts across this feeling that his characters are feeling through the camera. Paul Greengrass is just doing the same thing. A lot of people now, especially on Letterboxd, talk about, you know, how bad the shaky cam is and how redundant it is and how whatever it is. And I understand if you watch the Bourne Trilogy today in 2021, this trope of shaky cam and rapid cuts has been used into oblivion by action films after the Bourne Trilogy and have been overused and used in the wrong ways. And honestly, it makes sense why a lot of people would feel like, you know, I've had enough of this. But it is important to understand that its use in the Bourne Trilogy was relatively new. Even though you might not like it, that is completely fine. But again, I think it is important to note that it did popularize it, for better or for worse. In general, kind of exhausted of the shaky cam rapid cuts, you know, where you don't see what's happening in a lot of modern action films. And I think that's why I really hate watching a lot of action films. It's because of this very redundant filming style. I think there are more ways to film action scenes. There are more interesting ways to film action scenes, and that's why I really like the way films like Upgrade and John Wick film their action scenes, because it's interesting and different, exciting, you know, not just a copy of the Bourne Trilogy style, right? For example, like I remember there's this thing in Taken where like I really think there's like 10 cuts when like Liam Neeson is like jumping over a fence. Like, what is the point? And they're just an example of how the shaky cam has been overused into oblivion. Doug Liman's style was also very nice. I kind of like the very raw and straightforward thing going on. I think it's hard to compare and to choose which one is better, because they both very much fit the Bourne Trilogy. The later movies, like the last two movies, have that sense of extreme urgency to them. I feel like that fits the last two movies more than the first, because there's like upping the ante of the chase, basically. I think the Bourne Ultimatum is my favorite movie. I was thinking about, you know, the Bourne Identity, and I always like the first movie in a trilogy because it's like the introduction, and I do think the Bourne Identity is the most coherent out of them, the most grounded out of them. It almost has like an indie movie vibe, which sounds really strange since this is kind of a blockbuster kind of film, but it's not super complex. It doesn't have a lot of plot line strands. It does have a lot of intense chasing, but it doesn't have a lot of crowdedness, if that makes sense. It very much feels low-key. I like it. I like the vibe of the first movie, but I just really like the last movie, and I think a lot of people like the last movie too because it's the most popular. The reason why that is because I always respect an ending that pulls together the strings of, you know, the first two movies quite nicely and gives you like a more or less put together ending to the story, which is something that a lot of movies cannot pull off apparently, especially considering that this movie had a director change. Now, director changes in movies can be absolutely catastrophic. For example, I think a clear example of this is with Star Wars. Not only was it changed twice, it was changed 3 times, and if a director does not agree with the vision of the director before him, then not only can he make a completely incoherent trilogy because it can have a complete tonal shift, but he can just retcon things. I'm looking at you, Rian Johnson. I'm looking at you, J.J. Abrams. Work with what you have, okay? You have a brief. Work with it. And I think Paul Greengrass did that. I think he really just built on from what Doug Liman did. I'm so sure I'm saying Doug Liman's name wrong. And something I really like in this movie is there are lots of parts of these movies where like the Seya point at screens and they're like, oh my god, it's Jason Bourne. And that makes me laugh so much. It's this superhero-ification of Jason Bourne that I find interesting. In the first movie, it's fine. Again, I said that the first movie very much feels like an indie movie, even though it's not. But the last 2 movies, this guy will get in a car crash and he will walk it off. Like, bro, just having a limp after falling, after like going through all that crap, is not enough. I get he's like trained professionally by the Seya, but like, come on. He's like a genuine superhero. This guy is like always winning. I never see him down bad, which is something that I wish was elaborated on. Like, I love to see my characters have some breathing room in their stories to process what they're going through and suffer emotionally. They kind of tried to do that with the third movie with the death of, oh my god, spoiler alert, the death of his GF Mary. You know, they tried to make like this a recurring thing in the third movie. Having a flashback while he's driving for like 5 seconds is not enough. They try sometimes, you know, in between to kind of give him like a guilt where he feels guilty that, you know, everybody he gets involved with him gets killed or hurt, which is traumatizing. Wish it was elaborated on. While I do like the superhero-ification of Jason Bourne, and I'm like, whoa, that's like, how badass, that's so cool, he defeated the 10th person in a row. I also like to see more emotional depth, you know. Something else is throughout these 3 films, all right, and this is something nitpicky I think, but also valid, this guy needs to change his clothes. Like, the first time he like pairs up with the German girl, which I am so sorry, was her name Marie? I need to find out. He just like asks them to like dye their hair and change their look, but he never changes his look. He doesn't even bother to change his coat in like the second movie, I think, and like literally the Seya like point at screens and they're like, it's that coat. Like, come on, like, at least try, wear glasses, wear sunglasses, you know, like change your coat, wear a different color shirt, dye your hair, huh? Why do you keep asking other people around you to dye their hair? Why do you keep asking Julie Stiles to dye her hair, huh? Why don't you dye your hair? I think it also adds to this superhero element in his character where like he doesn't even need to to change anymore because he just knows he'll win, I guess. Change your clothes. It gave me so much stress watching. I'm like, literally change your coat. Something that's really, fun is the competency of the Seya wildly changes throughout the movie. Especially the last movie. Like, I remember there was a sequence in the beginning of that movie where they literally like hacked every single CCTV camera, and they literally like they heard one word in a phone call and they were like tracking this guy like from one place to the next and to the next, and it was to a point where it was kind of impossible for them to escape unless they were in an extremely crowded place, and they were, thankfully. This does not continue. I guess they sometimes lose their competency when there's like a plot to like let through the plot, I guess, and I understand the issues with these kind of films because it's hard to kind of let the plot go through when, most of the time the Seya would win. I just thought it was interesting how their competency wildly changed. There was that really cool scene where like calls the evil guy in the third movie, I forget his name, where he misleads the evil guy and then he just calls him up and he's like, I'm in your office. I just thought it was so funny in like a good way. These kind of things kind of make me forgive the way they made them incompetent, because whatever, like, it's fine. There was this lady, a character who got introduced in the second movie in the Seya, and I liked her character. I thought she was a really interesting character because I really think the idea of the glass cliff is underexplored in movies. And what the glass cliff concept is, it's actually something we learned in a university course recently. It's so embarrassing. Oh my god. It's basically when women are put into managerial or just any position with a high degree of responsibility, when there's a crisis or when there's about to be a downfall, and they basically like pin it on her, and they associate crises with women, and they put her in a place where she's set to fall. And that was literally what happened with this lady. Like, they put her in the position knowing that there was this huge like scandal on their hand, and that they were just gonna pin it on her if anything goes wrong. I thought that was really interesting, and it's things like that where they show the two sides, and it's not just from Jason Bourne's story, but it's also there's like a storyline with Seya. Let's talk about Marie Kreutz and Julia Stiles' character. I think Marie Kreutz is the actor, I don't remember who plays her. I think Franca Potente. I'm so sorry if I say her name wrong, but genuinely, she is very charismatic. Honestly, it's that thing where like a character falls in love with the first person they meet that always just makes me, confused. But it's fine, I guess. It was alright. But she started to get annoying in the second movie. Thankfully, well, not thankfully, but I was gonna say thankfully she was killed. That was a horrible thing to say. Here's the thing. I think that Julia Stiles' character, Nicky Parsons, would have been a more fitting love interest, and here is why. Imagine just the conflict. Not only would it make sense, and it would be like a longer thing, so it's not like falling in love as soon as you meet someone, but like something that has gone for longer. Just imagine like the complexity of that relationship. Like, she would have fallen in love through a while. I hate the term of falling in love. It is so cringe to me. I don't know why, but I'm literally cringing saying it. It makes sense for her to like him and sympathize with him because, again, she looked over Jason Bourne when he was like doing his training, I guess. According to her, he's been through some horrible stuff, so it makes sense that she would develop feelings. Additionally, the conflict of her being in the Seya and having to chase him down, whilst also at the same time having feelings for him, is a really good conflict. I think it would have been a great conflict, and it is not very developed, and I'm very upset about that. And this was something that was pointed out by other people, I think, too. Julia Stiles is criminally underused in this trilogy. She's not only a good actress, she also has a really interesting character. She has a character who basically oversaw Jason Bourne when he was going through the training and sympathizes with him, but also at the same time was assigned to like literally like chase him down. So there's complexity to that, and she's literally in this trilogy for like 2 to 3 scenes and then she disappears. And I'm like, okay, well, this is sad because I like Julia Stiles here and I think her character is very interesting. So I think this was also an interesting role because it broke out Matt Damon from this kind of Goodwill Hunting phase to like action star phase. I think it's interesting. I really like Matt Damon's acting. I really like his films. I wouldn't say much about his recent stuff. I like Ford versus Ferrari, but I cannot comment on Downsizing. I have no idea what that movie's about. I think it's about like small people or something. Oh my god, that is offensive. I don't mean small people. I mean like you know, people downsizing because of the environment. I don't get it. Like, but his movies are always like woke. Like they always have like wokeness behind. Nobody else could have played it, to be honest. I do wish he would have added more emotionality, and I honestly think it's something that is more on the writing side, because I love chase scenes, I love action scenes, but give the character room to breathe, and give the character room to breathe without just shoving in a love story to fill in that room to breathe, you know what I mean? Which I feel like they did here. Additionally, I also want to talk about the action scenes in these movies, which slap. They slap so hard. Like, they really ate this up. They really knew what they were doing with these action scenes, because I think one of my favorite action scenes ever is that one in the 3rd film. I think it's in Tangiers, and like they're chasing Jason Bourne and Nicky Parsons, and it's just filmed so nicely, and like it's just the perfect representation of the shaky cam handheld plus many cuts plus rapid cuts style, and why it fits so well in these movies and why they were so popular. Like literally it is just pure action in that scene. Like there's no like, you know, you know, like music and swelling of the music or whatever. It's just fighting and it's great. I think lastly, I think it's important to mention the new Jason Bourne movies, or the newer Jason Bourne movies that are not necessarily related to the trilogy, because again, we cannot just ignore its existence, even though I would love to just pretend it never happened. The Bourne Legacy, I honestly haven't really sat down and watched this one. Matt Damon's not in it, and also it's kind of irrelevant and doesn't make sense. I think the problem with it is that it doesn't have Matt Damon in the center, not because it's Matt Damon, but because the character of Jason Bourne was why people stuck around for the trilogy, I think, and found Jason Bourne's character interesting. And when you replace him with someone else, it's not that nice, you know? It's not that interesting anymore. I think this is also an issue with the new movie, the newer Jason Bourne movie, which was released in 2016 again. This one, I never felt. I haven't rewatched this one, but again, from the portions I've seen of it, it doesn't look very nice. Unnecessary, because the whole thing that made, you know, the Bourne trilogy interesting is because, you know, Jason Bourne's character was interesting in the sense that we didn't know what was going on with him. At the same time, the character didn't know what was going on with him, and that mystery of like piecing together his identity and us piecing together the identity with the character was the interesting part of these movies, and especially like the amnesia part. Having that stripped away of Jason Bourne makes him kind of boring. At what point does, you know, the chase become the storyline? You know, like I love chase scenes and everything, but when there's an additional complexity to it, then it's better. But in the new movie, that wasn't there, and also it's just so obviously a cash grab. There's like no heart behind it. Anyways, now that we're done with that and we've talked about everything, how did the Bourne trilogy give me personal development? Well, So, something you may not know about me, I used to be a big conspiracy head, right? I used to love conspiracy theories. And the reason why I was drawn into the Bourne Trilogy even at a younger age, even though I wasn't really paying attention to it, I was still drawn to it, and that's why I watched segments of it but never the full thing. And I used to read it all the time because I kind of like wanted to create mystery in my life. I wanted to like create uncertainty in my life. I wanted to create it synthetically, but there was a point, you know, growing up where I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore because my life provided that uncertainty, you know. 2021, if you relate, put your hands up. If I want to read conspiracy theories now, then I'll probably do it for fun more than anything, but back then I was really into it. Like, I was really into it, and I had to stop myself because it was just too much reading and too much spiraling. And yeah, you have to stop yourself at some point. And I think the Bourne Trilogy is something that really complemented but also developed in me this idea of, you know, I love conspiracy stories, I love conspiracy theories, and I love stories about conspiracy theories. I love stories with, you know, characters not remembering stuff about themselves. Hello, Winter Soldier, I see you there. It gave me personal development in the way that I see action films. I think, again, makes you understand why people used it afterwards, made me understand action films in general. I love a good chase scene. I love chase scenes so much. Do I have any memorabilia relating to the Bourne movies? None. Absolutely none, other than the fact that I used to watch it a lot with my family. If somebody were to cosplay Jason Bourne, he'd just wear a black coat. And that's it. It's a weird movie to get memorabilia for. Memorabilia is the song itself, Extreme Ways. I listen to it sometimes now and just reminds me of the movie. It reminds me of, you know, it makes me nostalgic. I think it's important to look back at things that we're nostalgic about and assess them from older eyes, you know, even if they're just slightly older, because nostalgia can be a good feeling, but it can also be a powerfully bittersweet and bad feeling. I think it's important to process those feelings and, you know, come to terms with them, coexist with them, be more critical about them. Like throughout these videos, I criticize the shows and the media I watch a lot. I think it's important to look back and say, hey, it wasn't perfect, but I loved it. But yeah, I think nostalgia is important and assessing nostalgia is important, and that's why we're doing the nostalgia factor. See you in the next one.